Okay, so when you hear the name Henry Ford, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Cars, right? Of course. But his story, man, it's so much bigger than just cars. We're talking about incredible invention, yeah, but also spectacular failure. And this stubborn, ironclad vision that literally changed the world as we know it.
I mean, just to give you a sense of how huge his impact was, get this. At one point, a full 50% of all the cars on the entire planet were Fords. Think about that. One guy, one company, owned half the road. It's insane. And the craziest part? The whole story starts with a kid who just really hated farming.
Yep, it all kicks off on a farm. This is where we see what pushed him, what drove him to completely reject the life he was supposed to lead.
So Henry was born back in 1863, and as the oldest son, his future was pretty much laid out for him. Take over the family farm. A life of slow, brutal, back-breaking work. But here's the thing, he despised it. He saw it as just inefficient and a total grind. He once said he didn't love the farm, he loved his mother on the farm. Oof. And that deep burning hatred for farm work? Well, that became the fuel for his lifelong obsession with making things faster, better, and more efficient.
And you could see this mechanical genius in him from a super young age. It was just in his DNA. Like when he was 12, his dad gave him a pocket watch. Most kids would just learn to tell time, right? Not Henry. He immediately took the thing apart, piece by piece, just to see how it ticked. Before long, he was the go-to watch repair guy for the entire neighborhood. So yeah, by the time he was 16, he was done. He packed his bags and bolted from the farm, heading straight for the industrial buzz of Detroit.
Okay, so you've got this young mechanical prodigy heading to the big city. You'd think success was just around the corner, right? Nope, not even close. His early career was, and I mean this, a masterclass in how to fail. Spectacularly.
So, in 1899, his first company, the Detroit Automobile Company, it went totally bankrupt. The investors were screaming for cars to sell, but Ford was just obsessed with tinkering, perfecting his design. He only made 20 cars in 2 years. Then, in 1901, he's at his second company, and again, he clashes with the money guys over his vision and just walks away. And get this, the company he left, they renamed it Cadillac. Can you believe that? But even after 2 huge flameouts, Henry Ford was just getting started.
And this quote from the man himself really says it all, doesn't it? Failure is simply the opportunity to begin again, this time more intelligently. I mean, most of us would have given up after 2 failed businesses, but not Ford. For him, it wasn't failure. It was just R&D. He was learning, tweaking his ideas, and getting ready for round 3.
All right, so this is it. This is the turning point. All those failures, all that learning, that obsession with efficiency, it's all about to pay off in a huge way. See, back then, every other car maker thought of the automobile as a luxury toy for the super rich. But Ford, he had a totally different vision. He said, I will build a motor car for the great multitude, so cheap that basically any guy with a decent job could own one. And this wasn't just some clever marketing line. This was his mission. It was the blueprint for his entire revolution.
So how was he going to do it? Well, the secret wasn't inventing a new car. It was inventing a new way to build a car. The story goes he was on a trip to Chicago and saw a slaughterhouse, of all places. He watched how they processed meat on a disassembly line, with carcasses moving on hooks from one station to the next, and a light bulb just went off. He thought, hey, what if we reverse that to build something? So instead of having workers run all over a factory to a car that's standing still, you bring the cart to the workers. Each person does one simple, repetitive task. It was so simple but absolutely brilliant.
And the results? They were just staggering. Before the assembly line, building one Model T took 12 hours. After, just 90 minutes. Let that sink in. 12 hours down to an hour and a half. This wasn't just a small improvement. This was a complete game changer for manufacturing and, honestly, for the entire world.
So when the Model T first came out, it cost $850. Now, that was still a good chunk of change back then, for sure. But even so, it was an absolute smash hit. They got 15,000 orders in just the first few days.
But here's where that assembly line magic really kicks in. Because it was so incredibly efficient, by 1916, Ford had dropped the price to under $400. He was literally passing the savings on to the everyday person, making good on that promise to build a car for everyone.
Okay, but there was a catch. The assembly line? Well, it was mind-numbingly boring. People were quitting left and right. Worker turnover was through the roof.
So what was Ford's solution? Absolute genius. In 1914, he doubled the average wage to $5 a day. His competitors thought he was insane. They all predicted he'd go bankrupt. But what actually happened? The best mechanics from all over the country flooded into Detroit. His turnover problem vanished. And, this is the brilliant part, he created a workforce of people who could actually afford to buy the very cars they were making.
So, at this point, Ford is on top of the world. He's done it. He's achieved the impossible. But here's the tragic twist in the story. That same unshakable, iron-willed belief that made him successful was about to become his biggest downfall.
By 1919, he was completely fed up with having investors to answer to. So he spent a fortune and bought out every single one of them. He was now the sole owner of the biggest car company on the planet. He had absolute total control. Nobody could question him, nobody could tell him he was wrong, and, as we're about to see, that was a very, very dangerous thing.
See, Ford got it into his head that the Model T was the perfect car, the final form. It never needed to change. You've probably heard the famous line, "You can have any color you want as long as it's black." And he wasn't kidding. As his rivals like Chevrolet started rolling out cars with more comfort, more style, and a whole rainbow of colors, Ford just dug in his heels. He refused to listen to anyone, not his top executives, not the market, not even his own son Edsel. And the result? It was absolutely devastating. By 1936, the company that once built half the cars in the world had plummeted to a distant third place. His own stubbornness had cost him everything. The man who had the vision to create the future was now completely blind to it.
But for all his flaws, Ford's story doesn't just end there in failure. So let's talk about his final years and the massive legacy he ultimately left behind.
It's a bit of a sad story, actually. His son, Edsel, died tragically, which forced an old, tired Henry Ford back into the driver's seat. He finally, and maybe a little reluctantly, handed over the reins to his grandson Henry Ford II in 1945. This move basically secured the company's future and kept it in the family.
Henry Ford himself died just 2 years later, in 1947, but he left behind a world that he had completely and utterly transformed. And the company he built? Well, it managed to survive his stubborn phase and is still, to this very day, one of the biggest automakers in the world. I mean, that's a testament to the incredible foundation he laid all those years ago.
And you know, when you look at his whole life, this final quote really feels like it sums everything up. He said, "Life is a series of experiences. The setbacks and griefs which we endure help us in our marching onward. From that kid on the farm, to the guy who failed twice, to the revolutionary who changed everything. Every single setback was just another step forward for him."
So, the story of Henry Ford really leaves us with this big, fascinating question. His unshakable, powerful vision literally built the modern world we live in, but that exact same vision is what nearly burned his entire empire to the ground. It really makes you think, right? When does a leader's greatest strength cross the line and become their most dangerous blind spot?